Tonight, Trump sheds the ceasefire, hiking U.S. tariffs from 25 to 35% overnight. No deal, no delay for Canada. Intense fallout, mixed reaction. We break it down. Who pays, who fights back, and where we go from here. From Montreal, this is a special edition of Night Talk. I'm Gary MacDonald, and of course, my sidekick, Eddie Takalik, is here with us as well. And Eddie, this is very quick. We put the show together very, very quickly this afternoon, actually, late this afternoon. And, we got talking about it, just felt that we really needed to at least provide an opportunity for people, even though it's the beginning of a long weekend in most of the country, to kind of get it out. And I really would like to know what people think, whether they think we should just now walk away from it for a while or for good or whatever. We really do want to hear from you. And you'll notice that both in YouTube and in Facebook in the comments section, we posted a question. That question says, should Canada retaliate with a round of tariffs, or should we walk from any further negotiations for a cooling off period, or both, really? That's what we have to decide, is both. So what happened? Well, okay. We had the August 1st deadline that Trump set a few weeks ago to get a deal done. As late as just Monday or Tuesday of this week, Prime Minister Carney said we were in intense negotiations, but again reiterated his stance that any deal that he signs has to be in the best interest of Canada. Period. The best interest of Canada. Not a deal just to get it out of the way and appease Trump. Now, there are a couple of sides to this whole thing. So anyhow, coming back around, Canada wasn't the only country that was hit with the tariffs after the August 1st deadline. A number of other countries were too. We get hit with another 35%. We're up to from 25% up to 35% on any goods not covered by the free trade agreement that Trump negotiated in his first term with us and Mexico. It also does not cover certain segments such as steel, aluminum, and now copper, where he has 50% tariffs on those goods. So it covers pretty much everything else in between. And there are a couple of things that I've picked up on today, listening to a few of the experts, talking to the various news organizations. We'll get into that in a few minutes. But let's just, before we do that, we do have a couple of comments coming in already. The ladies are raring to go here. And I should switch to this view. There we go. And we'll bring that up again. All right. Monel says, walk away for now. There's supposed to be an appeal court reviewing the tariffs legality, and they're supposed to give their opinions on Monday. And yes, that is true. Trump didn't bother waiting for those opinions. I don't know if the courts will rule against him, and even if they do, in all likelihood, he's going to ignore whatever the ruling is, because that's just the way he's started to operate. And Deborah says we should walk away from talks and we need to turn their lights off. Wow. Now, she's beginning to sound like Doug Ford from Ontario. Yeah. There's no question. I think, and as we get into this, we'll talk about some of the options available, but I think we really do have to draw a line in the sand and put our foot down on this one for sure. So we're caught up on the comments, and we'll get back to the thrust of their comments here in a few minutes. So anyway, the tariffs, Trump sent a letter to Prime Minister Carney. The tariffs went on. Now, the Prime Minister responded shortly after midnight. He released a statement, and We have the statement here. In the highlights from the statement, the Canadian government is disappointed. The Canadian government will act to protect Canadian jobs, invest in our industrial competitiveness, buy Canadian, and diversify our export markets. Oh, I left out an X there. Canada accounts for only 1% of U.S. fentanyl imports and has been working intensively to further reduce these volumes. We will continue to negotiate with the United States on our trading relationship. That's essentially what he's saying in that 5-paragraph letter that's to the right of that. And I don't know, whatever, if you're watching on a big screen TV, you should be able to see that without any real issue. But on the smaller screens, I'm not so sure it will come through all that great. So that was the Prime Minister's reaction. And other than that, I have not heard or even seen anything from the Prime Minister. Certainly I have not, and I've been watching most of the day on and off, as you were, Eddie, and I did not see any clips of the Prime Minister. I don't believe he held a news conference or anything. He's been, I don't know what he's doing, but very low key in this. So that's what we have from the Prime Minister, and he released that shortly after midnight, I believe it was. So that is where he stands. Now, our chief negotiator, Dominique LeBlanc, is headed back to New Brunswick after spending weeks in Washington along with our ambassador in Washington. And he said that he will, the talks will continue next week. He'll be sitting down with Lutnick next week. Trump's a trade czar, guru, or whatever title he's given him. And, I hope Dominique has a nice bottle of scotch sitting in his cottage in New Brunswick, because after looking across the table at this crew over the last number of weeks negotiating, there was an article I found this morning where some of the people familiar with the negotiations, insiders, have said that the best way to describe the negotiations is chaotic. Apparently, the Americans came in every day with some new demand, some new irritant. Every day.
Wow.
So if they had made any kind of progress, or they felt they had made any kind of progress, from our side, one day, the next day, out the window it went because there was a new demand or irritant.
How do you establish any common ground with that? That is tough.
Yeah, you don't. You just don't. And the other thing that the inside sources are saying is not only were they dealing with that, but it was all very one-sided. Apparently, the American negotiators really didn't give a damn about whatever Canada felt would be fair that we should get in exchange. It was all one-sided. This is what the United States wants. This is what the president wants. This is what we're not doing anything unless we get this. So again, you're right. How do you negotiate in a climate like that? It is really, really a tough go. Now we have Joe weighing in here. So out to the West Coast we go. There was never any indication that Trump would deal in an honorable manner. Once again, he was using the fentanyl issue as a reason to impose tariffs.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. No question. And it still is. As I stated the other day, Trump's motive is to steal our resources and to threaten our sovereignty. No question. That's where he's headed. And that came up in our conversation the other night. I reminded everyone of what he said back in January. He doesn't have to invade Canada, doesn't have to pull a military operation. He said, I'll take them to their knees through economic means. And that's
Yeah.
what he's been trying to do through economic means. Now, last week, there was a flurry of activity from Trump. First of all, he announced a deal with Japan. And part of that deal included Japan investing $500 billion in the U.S. over a period of time. Well, lo and behold, the Japanese said, wait, hold it. No. It's not quite like that. It's not quite like that, folks. Like, this is what we agreed to. We worked out on the tariff things, but overall, this deal, so-called deal, really is just a framework to build upon in further negotiations. And secondly, yes, a certain portion of that $500 billion will be direct investment on the part of Japan, but the greatest amount is going to be loans to the United States, repayable loans.
Right.
How great is that deal?
Well, and it's funny though. I mean, you have Japan coming back and saying, hold the horses. This is just a framework. On episode 44 on Wednesday, we talked about the EU, and they came out with 3 points, and basically point one was no. This is just a framework. You look at the UK. They're not saying a whole hell of a lot. There's a lot of appeasement to Trump while Trump was over in Scotland and whatnot. But the only thing that I see so far that Trump's been able to get from them specifically that's concrete is the fact that the importers in the United States bringing over your Rolls Royces, your Jaguars, and that kind of vehicle are not going to be tariffed. I don't call that a victory for the American people or the United States of America. Is the UK just placating him and you go on your way, Mr. Trump, and we'll continue to conduct business here as we see fit? You're looking at other countries with saying that there's a framework in place. I think Thailand mentioned there was a framework. Cambodia mentioned there's some sort of framework. You have India going outright and saying, you know what? No, not at all. We don't have a deal. And that's point one. And point two, he didn't broker any sort of a ceasefire agreement between us and Pakistan. So stop doing that. I haven't seen one country that's basically standing beside Trump and doing cartwheels with him. Every one of them is just very reserved, letting the Trumpster shoot his mouth off and, let him say what he has to say and, finish the interview and finish the fireside chat and get on with the business of evolving their own country. So I haven't seen anything fantastic. You know what? If there is a big deal that's coming through, I will certainly give him the accolades and say, you know what, Trump, I'll give you this one out of 200 and some odd countries. Well, the only one he's got right now that's a done deal is the one with the penguins, the island with the penguins. But that's about the extent of it,
And we all know how interested the penguins are in Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
So Monell comes back with, you need to refer to them as deal. That's Trump's interpretation.
Right, deal.
Yeah, deal, the art of the deal. And Deborah says, the U.S. in its present state will not pay any loans off, and any country that lends to them or invests in them in any way, not doing themselves any favors. A lot of truth in that as well, Deborah.
Can you imagine if the countries of the world actually call in their loans, basically saying, you know what, we'd like to have our money back now?
Do you know who holds a huge chunk of U.S. debt?
Russians?
China,
yes, that's right.
If you remember back around 2016 when the Chinese economy was faltering a bit, and one of the major concerns was the amount of U.S. debt that they were holding at that point in time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and Monell says, air quotes, Gary, air quotes. Oh, I know. I gotcha. So there was that. And let's just have a quick look at that EU deal again that he was so proud of was it Saturday or Sunday that he announced it? I can't remember. It was, yeah. Okay. So, where did my screen go? Oh, here we are. Okay. So, the US-EU trade deal, which now the EU is saying, not really, it's a framework. 15% tariff imposed on most EU imports versus the threatened 30%. 0 for 0, no tariffs on aircraft parts, semiconductors, select generic drugs, and agricultural goods. $750 billion energy deal, the EU to buy U.S. energy products over 3 years. $600 billion investment, committed EU capital in U.S. by 2028. 50% metals tariffs remain on steel, aluminum, copper, and pending the quota talks related to those. And critics say it favors the U.S. and may raise consumer prices in Europe. So let's go back for a moment and let's have a look at the $750 billion energy deal over 3 years. How long do you think it will take to construct a natural gas pipeline from Quebec City to St. John, New Brunswick?
Well, that's probably a 3-4 year project.
And if it was expedited within the 3 year time frame, maybe
well, in
2 years?
Well, yeah. In New Brunswick, I'm sure it's going to get finished in a year. In Quebec, I don't know, man. 2-3 years. Let's call that on the outside.
Okay. So what we have here is the European Union, and Trump apparently doesn't realize this.
Mm-hmm. They're
going to use the energy they get from the U.S. to offset what they were buying from the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time that they're coming near the end of that part of the deal, hopefully we'll have our act together and have a pipeline going through to St. John.
Right.
And we can start loading natural gas onto tankers for Europe.
And sending it over there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, okay. Not only that, I mean, you're talking about a $750 billion energy deal, right? Where are the United States going to get that to be able to provide that kind of a supply and demand over to the European Union? They're going to do what? Buy ours at a tariffed rate, take that, turn around, and sell it over to Europe at what? An accelerated rate compared to what they agreed with. So the European potentially might be buying $750 billion worth of energy, but in terms of quantitatively, they're not getting what their dollar or their money is going to buy 4 years from now, or I don't know. I mean, I think it's just going to be more expensive for them to buy energy from the United States and actually get less of it because of the tariffs that are being imposed in the United States for bringing in our resources into the United States and then reselling them. So, I mean, it's a back-to-back coverage of expenses, and at the end of the day, whoever buys it at the end of the entire funnel are going to pay more for it for less of it. So pretty convoluted.
Yeah.
Very
convoluted. If we do put any kind of a significant tariff on our energy or oil exports to the U.S.
Yeah.
Remember, that's a contentious issue with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith.
Right. But didn't the Americans place a tariff on our energy as well? Didn't they do? I believe they did, right?
They did.
Yeah. So
I guess maybe
if they're importing our energy while we're exporting it, I mean, obviously somebody in the United States is filling up the coffers of the government with an energy tariff, right? They're not going to want to absorb the cost. They're going to pass it on to somebody else, I would think.
Exactly. So there are a few question marks around that particular aspect of this agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, I think this is just a stopgap measure. And I was watching a couple of discussions on this, and they're all kind of coming to that conclusion that it's a stopgap measure until Canada is able to start delivering. And that's why another reason why it's so important to get a pipeline completed to the East Coast, so that we can start shipping energy and selling energy offshore to Europe, and they're hungry for the energy. The $600 billion investment committed EU capital in the U.S. by 2028. The EU president was quoted later as saying that that's all going to be private, like business investment. And that's a goal, but there are no guarantees that any corporations are going to be in a position or want to invest any significant amount of money in the U.S. And I would suggest one of the reasons being the way that Trump has treated them, number one, but even more so, you don't send good money into a country that is unstable. Mm-hmm. And whether Americans realize it or whether they want to hear it, their country is becoming more unstable every day as their president becomes more unhinged. Look at the other day, BC Premier David Eby. 700 doctors from the United States applying to get into British Columbia and set up practice or go to work in the healthcare system because
they're being welcomed with open arms.
Yeah, because they're under threat in the U.S. over the anti-abortion laws and things. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so the country, whether people realize it, they're on the verge of becoming almost as unstable as some of these smaller third world countries. It's coming to a point.
Some of these other banana republics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you've had people already marching in the streets. It was like, kind of watching a throwback to the 60s earlier. And those were peaceful demonstrations for the most part. How long is that going to go on? As peaceful as the frustration levels grow and they start paying more. And here's the other side of it. Just this week, a number of major corporations in the U.S. said, we're not eating the increased costs. We're passing it on to the consumer. Walmart, Procter & Gamble, Nike, just to name a few.
And the big three in the automotive sector. I mean, just the last quarter alone, just Ford alone lost billions in that one quarter because and directly associating it with tariffs. How much longer can these guys absorb this? And I think the Trumpster basically asked them or insisted that they absorb the tariff costs. I mean, that's not the way. That's not the way to A, run a business, and B, run a country. And you can't just outrightly demand a company to do anything at all. Just like in the EU, $600 billion investment. What is somebody going to tell a company that you must do business with the United States? That's not how it works, right?
Yep. So good luck in getting the $600 billion.
Yeah.
Because if I'm the CEO of a company in Europe and I'm looking over across the pond at what's happening in the United States, do you think I'm going to make any kind of a commitment to a new plant or an office or whatever?
Canada and Mexico are starting to look good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's the other side of it. Mexico gets a 90-day reprieve as far as
Yeah. How does that go? And as Ford says it, I mean, we're their biggest economic customer in terms of trade. We're basically getting the sole of somebody's boot down in the United States, and meanwhile, Mexico gets a 90-day reprieve. Well, you know what, Gary? 90 days. I was wrong. I said we're going to get another 2 weeks on Wednesday, so I do apologize for that. You know what? At least we know where they're at now. We don't have to wait another 90 days to piddle and paddle around. It kind of forces our hand to be direct right now. And I was just thinking about Carney's one and only statement that he had actually made officially right after midnight. I'm basically going to look at that. That here's my message and my communique to the United States of America. And you know what? I'm hanging up the phone. Click, which is maybe why we're not hearing anything from him. It's basically, you know what, we've had enough, and we're going to continue moving forward with your consultation or not. While of course, we have the our minister dealing with Nutlick there,
Yeah.
and continuing to deal with the government in parallel. You can't just cut talks 100% off. I think we walk away and have parallel discussions. And you know what? It cannot be the same deal that we've had on the table for decades. Right? New world, new way of conducting business. The United States is not the United States that we've all grown to love anymore. It's become something else that you might be able to write about in a mystery novel or a fantasy novel, because this is just nuts the way they're conducting themselves from a governmental perspective. And we got to find a way to move on, just like Prime Minister Harper had said, former Prime Minister Harper. We need to extricate ourselves and diversify. And it's a big world out there ready to do business with other people besides the United States. And I think we just, in my opinion, I don't think we capitulate. I think we basically, not bow to the king. I think a lot of countries are not bowing to the king. And the more we don't bow to him, the more pissed off he gets and more erratic he gets. Let him continue being erratic while we conduct a professional, sane, level-headed business to evolve our country and not have to rely on the United States and actually become the powerhouse of the Americas. That's
The
the
one,
direction to go
yeah,
to.
and I agree with what you're saying, Eddie. Except I don't know how much more erratic I want Trump, because remember, there's a guy
Yeah,
following him with the codes at all times.
right. That's true too. Well, you know what I mean. I forget which one of our viewers mentioned it. I think it was Deborah. Shut off the power. I would love to see that happen. Okay, really watch them sweat and watch them try to tap into other power sources in the United States, real time power sources such as electricity. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
um, with the erratic thinking of the government down in the United States, they would basically interpret that as an act of war.
Yeah.
Okay, and when they'll interpret something as a real act of war against the United States, we're going to see troops coming across the border. So that's my feeling. I certainly hope I'm just being overly cautious and overly pessimistic about this, but the Trumpster just might send the troops over the border. And you know what? We're not in any position to stop an onslaught of the United States military right off the bat, unless we get assistance from other parts of the world. But we're
Well,
oceans away from any help, right?
yeah. Don't forget, an attack
Yeah,
on one NATO country is an attack on all NATO countries. The
yeah,
real twist here is the fact that the U.S. is also a NATO country. So
right.
one NATO country attacking another NATO country, but in this case, I think NATO would be on our side.
I would think so too,
Yeah.
because they've been the United States has been very erratic in terms of its commitments to NATO, and I think they were the only country did not sign that article you just defined. If one country gets attacked, everybody else jumps in on the bandwagon to defend the said attacked country. I believe
Mm-hmm.
the United States were the only ones who abstained in the last NATO meeting from signing that particular article. So you know what, they might. You know what, that kind of scares me right now. I just realized is this a preemptive decision in not signing that article because they're planning on what, Greenland and maybe us at some point? You never know, man.
No, yeah,
You just don't.
and that
Scary.
changes from day to day, hour to hour,
Yeah.
sometimes in that guy's head. Okay, catch up on a couple of comments. Deborah says maybe we'll be in a position to make the U.S. the 11th province or 4th territory. Wouldn't that turn the tables big time?
Yeah. Gary,
We
all we need is
want them.
California. All we need is California. And the United States is toast.
Exactly. California and Washington State, boom,
Yeah.
away we go. And let's see. Ian, welcome to the show tonight. Well said,
Hey,
guys.
Ian.
Yes, and
Hi,
he
Ian.
says, buy what we manufacture here in Canada and find alternate countries to deal with. No question. And in the Prime Minister's statement early this morning, he did allude to the fact that we will continue now on our new course of looking for new trading partners and opportunities elsewhere, and build upon those as well as becoming very good at building and buying ourselves, like what we need from ourselves as we bring down the interprovincial trade barriers. So thanks again, Ian, and welcome. And we have Joe with, I hope the name Trump becomes synonymous with failure. In some respects, Joe, I think it is in some business circles. How do you bankrupt casinos? Yeah.
Yeah, you have to really try hard.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, and there are a couple of things I do want to follow up on. Let me go over here, and let's go back over to this particular page because I want to bring up a response today from Quebec Premier François Legault. I was somewhat disappointed with his response, personally. Essentially, the bottom line of it is we support a firm strategic response, but not one that shoots ourselves in the foot. Quebec jobs are at stake. And along the line, he also mentioned about Quebec, what's good for Quebec, which is a bit of a turn away from the middle of the road, where when the premiers were meeting together 2 weeks ago, and he was on board, and up to that point it had been Quebec and Canada.
Yeah.
In this statement that I looked through, I didn't see any real reference to Canada, nor did I hear today at one point when other news outlets were referring to it as well. But yes, Quebec jobs are at stake. And not only Quebec jobs are at stake, but jobs across the country are at stake.
I think that's what he should have said. Canadian jobs are at stake.
Right.
That would have
Or
been
Canadian and
correct
Quebec
thing to
jobs.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, something
You
like
know,
that. Yeah.
I think that would have been a much more unified signal, because don't think for a moment that the people in the White House are not looking for any indication of any kind of a crack in the unity that this country has been displaying since the first of the year.
Right.
So, I was a little disappointed with the response, the way that it was phrased. Now, speaking of responses, Eddie. Speaking of responses, Premier Doug Ford yesterday was in Thunder Bay, and I guess they're putting an order in for new streetcars for Toronto, if I'm not mistaken, but new streetcars anyhow.
Right.
He brought up a couple of points. One point is that until the other day, he did not realize that as far as the steel industry is concerned, We do not manufacture the steel I-beams that are used in construction.
Right. And
Those are imported. He did not know that. I did not know that until he brought that up. He also said he discovered that the rails that they use for the streetcars in Toronto, and I would imagine like for the REM and for the light rapid transit in Ottawa and out in Calgary and in, I think in Vancouver it's a slightly different system. It's older. But anyway, we don't manufacture those rails in Canada. They're imported. And he said, and it makes sense to me. Here are two items. Why are we importing these items? Why are not our steel plants manufacturing these items as required?
Honoring trade commitments, I guess, if there's any sensible answer. But in today's circumstances and what we're facing, you know what?
All bets are off.
Cancel whatever contracts we have down there. Sue me if you have to. We're going to be keeping our workers on the job, continually employed, building whatever materials we need to build our infrastructure up, putting our buildings up, and extending our transit system. We're going to insource everything. Absolutely. Yep. The time is up for being nice and committing to trade deals when the Trumpster doesn't respect anything. And I agree 100% with Premier Ford. We've got to take care of our own.
Well, speaking of Premier Ford, I'd like to play this. It's a little bit longer, not that bad. I think there's a solid message here, not only for Ontario, but for Canada in general.
First of all, I've never seen this country more united, ever, in all my years of being in politics, and it's a great feeling, all provinces, territories, municipalities, and the federal government. But, Prime Minister Carney's trying his best, but this guy will say something one day, and he'll wake up, and the cheese slips off the cracker, and then all of a sudden he goes the other way. And you're thinking, how do you deal with a guy like this? Are we hoping that we can get a deal with zero tariffs? Yes. But I always say how we can kick back, and it's not the American people, kick back at President Trump. Let's start onshoring everything, absolutely everything we possibly can. Canada buys $359 billion US off the folks south of the border. 9 million Americans wake up every single morning to produce a widget or a good just for Ontario alone. Those 9 million jobs are in jeopardy right now. We buy more products off the US than Japan, Korea, China, the UK, and France combined. So I wouldn't roll over, and I've told the Prime Minister, do not roll over, hit that guy back as hard as we possibly can, and that's what we need to do. And we can do it. We can build anything here in Canada, absolutely anything. From the beautiful trains that we build here, to the planes, to automobiles, to satellites, to jet engines, and the list could go on and on and on. And our strength are the people. We have the brightest people anywhere in the world right here in Ontario. So when everyone goes out, another very powerful tool are the people of Canada. When you go out and you go to buy a product, just flip it around the back and see where it's manufactured. And buy Canadian when you can, anything possible. And I got to call one company out that I learned when I was, just 2 days ago, I met with all these tin can users and their food products. Is a company called Campbell's Soup. They told me that Campbell's Soup's putting a Canadian flag on their cans. They closed their plants here. They moved everything down to the US. And they put recipe made in Canada. What sort of nonsense is that? Don't let them hoodwink you. I'm going to call them out again. I'm going to show you one of their cans. It's unacceptable that they do that. Don't try to pull one over people's eyes. Canadians are too smart for that.
Yep. That was a motivating speech.
Yeah.
Emotions off the cuff of his sleeve. reserved anger, and certainly he's got a lot of fortitude in what he wants accomplished for Canada and Ontario second. He always brought Canada up first. After I saw that this morning, Gary, I texted you right off the bat and saying, this man is on the ball and he speaks volumes and he speaks on behalf of a lot of Canadians from both sides of the political spectrum, both, whether you're a liberal voter regularly or a conservative voter. I think it'd be very tough for anybody to criticize the comments that Premier Ford made this morning.
Yeah, he did an extremely good job as chair of the Council of the Federation over the last year, coming into January when all hell broke loose with Trump and the trade war. And he did an extremely good job of leading the premiers, speaking on behalf of all of the premiers, but leading the premiers and keeping the premiers united. And then Prime Minister Carney comes along, and the two of them working extremely well together. And Ford has expressed his how much he likes and respects Carney. And he said, I was watching him the other day, and he said, some people are suggesting, or he was asked about, how do you say to your conservative base that here's a liberal who's your good friend, and you sat at into the middle of the night in a fire or at a fire outside your cottage, when they had their last meeting. And he said, that's where you get business done. And he said, I have a lot of respect for the Prime Minister. And he said, you have to go across party lines for the benefit of everyone. So,
absolutely.
He's speaking more and more I mentioned it in episode 44 the other night, but he's speaking more and more to me, what you're getting with Doug Ford. And he's no angel. He's a very smart politician. And I think the federal Conservatives, if they haven't started already, some of them should be tapping Ford on the shoulder and saying, we'd like for you to get ready.
Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't peg him as an extreme conservative. I think he's a common sense conservative, just like Carney's a common sense liberal. They'll cross that line back and forth if it benefits the country, and that's how good administrations and good governments work and should work at bipartisan work, different representing different walks of life and different beliefs in the country, unifying to address common issues and getting the country back on its feet and chugging forward. That's the best way to do it, Gary, as opposed to just split down the middle and throwing grenades at each other and not accomplishing very much. And I mentioned this in our last couple of shows. Poilievre and Trudeau could certainly learn just by turning on the television and watching Premier Ford and watching Prime Minister Carney work hand in hand with the other premiers of the country and leaders of our three territories on how to work within a government to make it work. We didn't see very much of that in the last eight years, I would say, but we're seeing a lot of it over the last 6 months. And as a Canadian, I'm very pleased to see that there's a representation of both spectrums of the way we view our politics up here. Either conservative, NDP, or liberal. And I think there's a representation of Canadians right across the board when these two individuals speak on behalf of the premiers, and these individuals speak on behalf of our government to the rest of the world, and namely the United States. So I'm really pleased with it. Really happy to see that.
Well, coming back around to a comment earlier, and I believe it was Deborah who made it. Let me just go back through here. Where was it? Yeah, here it is. I'll just bring it back up. And it was this one. There you go. There we go. We should walk away from the talks and we need to turn their lights off. At the very least, we need to walk away from the talks and do what Ford started out with, and that was putting a surcharge on the electricity that they were selling to the U.S. I think I
think he reached out to 3 governors: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wouldn't go to turning the lights off yet, but that's a very definite possibility if Trump wants to really start slinging mud around. Okay. Yeah. And the same with Quebec.
Thinking, Deborah.
Yeah. And the same with Quebec, because Quebec sells some power down through to New York and into New York City. And you remember back in February, March, Legault at that point said that perhaps President Trump should remember that the lights in Trump Tower in New York City,
by,
Quebec, or with Quebec Power. So I think that we need to stop playing the low key here now. The negotiations are as frustrating as anything, chaotic. If you've got them coming in with a different demand or irritant every day, and it's all one-sided, like what's the point? Just walk away. Yeah. We're stuck with the tariffs anyhow, until you could be beating your head against the wall from now until this time next year. So why don't we just say, okay, we're done. And then let's start hammering them with tariffs and things like surcharge on the electricity. And Ford, if you said to Doug Ford at 5:00 in the afternoon, you're good to go with the surcharges, I would bet you before the midnight, he would have that in place.
Mm-hmm.
And Danielle Smith has to soften a bit and back off a bit. And if we say that there's going to be tariffs or some kind of a surcharge on the oil flowing to the U.S., get on board with it, because it's going to be for the betterment in the long run. Now, the tariffs that we have imposed or were imposed over the last number of months have put some extra money in our bank account as well. Mm-hmm. And today I heard, believe it may have been the Canadian Federation of Independent Business rep. I think it was. There were 2 or 3 business organizations like in a row that I was watching. Anyway, the call was take the money that you have brought in from the tariffs and use those funds to help workers who are being hit by the impact of the tariffs in their jobs here. And when Trudeau first talked about putting the tariffs on and launched the tariffs, that was the intent at that point, was any of the money brought in by tariffs we imposed on U.S. goods would be used to offset any losses or hardships, for business and workers affected by the U.S. tariffs. And I think that should still be top of mind for the Prime Minister and, as he calls it, the new government. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's one of those things that we need to address ASAP. So I think that's where we go. But you know what? And I'd like to do, for the people who are still here, I'd like to do one more quick go around in the comments. Should we now walk away from these talks and just let Trump cool his heels or throw a fit, tantrum, whatever, and just let it go and really just have kind of a cooling off period and see if they are ready to get serious with the negotiations? Yes, everybody wants something going into a round of negotiations. That's what they're for. But to come in and just keep it all one-sided and throwing up a new obstacle every day, like the fentanyl issue, and that's something I forgot to show you.
Fentanyl issue. I mean, yeah. I mean, the only comment I have on that, Gary, is we get a hell of a lot more drugs pouring in from the United States into Canada than the other way. I'm just getting so tired of that statement. I think Joe mentioned it as well. It's a lame duck statement.
It is. It really is. Anyway, I just wanted to show you from the White House.
For 25.5 thousand kilograms of illegal drugs from the United States pouring into our borders, and that's drugs that was actually caught. The other way around for 2024, 7,800 kilos from Canada into the United States. And where the problem? And then when you start looking at fentanyl, right? About 43 pounds of it, 19.5 kilos, came from Canada into the United States that was caught by the American CBP, compared to a staggering almost 10,000 kilos coming in from Mexico. Yet they get their 90 days grace, which I really don't care for. But we're the bad ones in this.
Yeah.
So, you've seen it. I've said it before, and Joe has eloquently put it today and numerous times. This whole thing about fentanyl and convincing the Republican base that the reason he's doing it and justifying his tariffs is because of a drug problem, a problem of drugs pouring over the Canadian-American border into the U.S. is it's just a load of crap. And he's really after our resources, and that's the basis behind this statement of making Canada its 51st state. And you said it numerous times, and with every comment that he makes related to the tariffs he's imposing on our supposed to be his best economical neighbor, from a business perspective, it just doesn't wash. And I'm really hopeful that the American public is going to slowly start to realize that, what he's doing is just not right. And you know what? When people start losing a lot of their jobs, and a lot of the numbers are coming out saying that the last couple of days, and the base start losing their jobs, and they start losing their social benefits and whatever else. When it comes down to the dollars and cents for the American family, I think voices are going to rise. But how much damage is this guy going to do before that actually happens? And the damage he's done already in 6 months is quite considerable, Gary. And like you said, we got another 3.5 years of this if he's still standing on his 2 feet, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things in this fact sheet that they put out last night. Today, addressing a national emergency. Today, President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order increasing the tariff on Canada from 25% to 35%, with the higher tariff set to go into effect on August 1st, 2025. Shortly after returning to office, President Trump declared a national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to address, among other things, the public health crisis caused by fentanyl and illicit drugs flowing across the northern border into the United States. Canada has failed to cooperate in curbing the ongoing flood of fentanyl and other illicit drugs and has retaliated against the United States for the president's actions to address the unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States. In response to Canada's continued inaction and retaliation, President Trump has found it necessary to increase the tariff on Canada from 25% to 35% to effectively address the existing emergency. What a pile.
What a crock.
Yeah.
Oh man, oh man.
I just
blame the United States drug problem on Canada. Yeah. Let's just ignore the fact that the United States of America are the largest consumers on the planet of illicit drugs. Okay, let's not address the problem. Let's blame it on Canada. We're the ones who's perpetuating all this on the poor American citizen. Oh my. And you know what? The unfortunate part is people gobble that stuff up down south.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. Joe says, I agree with Doug Ford. It's infuriated me to no end over the years watching our industries heading south or overseas. Mm-hmm. And we have a couple more here. And Joe says, along with our raw materials being exported and ultimately bought back as a finished product at exorbitant prices. A lot to be said for that too, Joe. Wow. And Monel comes in and says, gloves off, elbows up. That's, we've kind of softened a little bit on the elbows up, I think, and I think it's time to get back. Okay. And Joe just came back with, we need to walk away from the table and boycott anything American. I am appalled when I still see Canadians lined up heading south at the border crossings. Under these circumstances, I feel it's absolutely traitorous. That's
a lot of people feel like that too. Feel just like Joe,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That is really, really something to think about. I hadn't quite taken it that far yet, but I see where he's going with it because, and there are some things we're kind of caught in between here. There are a number of things we can boycott because there are Canadian alternatives. Mm-hmm. And as we're finding out, the Canadian alternatives are as good as or better than what we've been getting from the U.S. anyway. And especially when you look at some of the processed foods and everything, what's going into their foods versus what we don't put into our processed foods. Although we're not any angels, but it's not a chemical soup for sure.
It's almost like you look at different things on television, on the news, and on reasonable streams. You have American farmers saying, "What do you mean you don't want our GMO'd corn?"
Yeah.
In Europe, like why don't they take our wheat? Why don't they take our corn and our beef? I mean, what you're leaving out is a GMO part of it, and in most countries, it's illegal to have GMO crops. You cannot force people to buy things they don't want to buy. Governments just can't do that in a lot of cases, and especially when you get down to the commodity level, you have to look at the quality and the safety of the commodities that you're actually bringing into your country because you don't want GMO seed to end up in your farmlands in France or in Spain for that fact.
Yeah, exactly.
Or American milk into Canada. I mean, the American milk is the cows are so hormone they can barely stand up. Why would you want to put that in Canadians' bodies, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is, like I say, we're torn in some areas because, let's look at things like Costco and Walmart, for example. American companies
Yes.
with a worldwide footprint. However, they are paying taxes in this country, and they are paying employees. They're employing Canadians in this country. And I've noticed a lot of these US based retailers have started, especially in the last couple of months, making a bigger effort to display and promote, feature
Canadian goods, yeah.
Canadian goods. So they're
Mhm.
buying Canadian where possible. So, there's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation that we find ourselves in. And that's because of how tightly integrated we've become with the
Our
United
economies
States.
are, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you have things like Apple.
Mm.
And there's no computer manufacturer in Canada right now that's doing what Apple does, that I'm aware of anyway. But again, Apple has a footprint in Canada. They have stores here. They employ Canadians. They're paying taxes here. So again, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But there are other aspects of technology where there are Canadian options available, a lot of which, just in the last couple of months, Eddie, you and I have discovered quite by accident because we were, out looking what
Right.
alternatives do we have, and so
Well, like even like products in the grocery store. I mean, you mentioned Costco and whatnot. I mean, I've been to Costco and I've been very cautious to try to buy as much Canadian product as I could. Look, sometimes you just don't have a choice. There are things that we just cannot get here in Canada that are manufactured in Canada that are made in the United States. And I'll end up having to buy it because at that time I don't have an alternative. I'm not going to necessarily go to four different grocery stores to buy a particular product to find that it's Canadian, right? And myself personally, I think we're about 90 to 95% of the time we're buying a Canadian product or a non-American product. 5% of the time, don't have a choice. I'm just going to grab that American product. We try to shop at Canadian owned stores. We will go to the WalMarts and we will go to the Costco's, but we'll still try to shop Canadian or buy South American or Mexican. So it took a while to get used to it, but it's becoming rather second nature, and we're getting pretty good with it. And I've seen a lot of
mhm.
comments on social media of Canadians being very proud of actually doing that, as opposed to just walking into a grocery store and grabbing whatever they could quickly at the cheapest price, not taking into consideration whether it's actually made in Canada or not. And for my wife and I, it's second nature. The other thing under our direct control is travel into the United States. And I agree with Joe. It's something that we don't plan to do anytime soon. And the only occasion we are going to take to go into the United States, because we don't necessarily are in a position to avoid it, is family. We have family down in the United States, so there we might make an exception. But even then, I'll probably minimize my spending as much as I possibly could, as opposed to just willy-nilly spending money and contributing to the American economy. And there are a lot of people, a lot of couples like my wife and I, just completely avoiding travel to the U.S. We're avid cruisers. I will not step on a cruise line that's owned by the United States. So yeah, it's a little bit of a sacrifice. But I feel good about it, and my wife feels good about it as well. And a lot of our neighbors, when we talk to them about it, or friends, they actually are very motivated and inspired by what we're trying to do to Canada first. And I'm proud of it. I don't like doing this because I have a lot of friends in the United States. A lot of them are suffering suffering through what's going on right now. And you know what? I think that the consequences of Canadians buying Canadians and boycotting American good is going to start resonating to some of the good people I know in the United States. And they're going to start struggling with increased grocery costs. It's already happening. Fuel is going up. Commodity spending, anything related to commodity buying, groceries and whatnot, is on the increase down there, which is really, really, really unfortunate and just wasn't necessary. But look, it's the circumstances today. My elbows are up all the time. My wife's elbows are up all the time, and we're 100% behind what our leaders are saying. Buy Canadian as much as you can, and I could say very proudly that that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, and we are too, and I can tell you that even after if after the next 3 years and Trump is no longer president, no longer has any kind of an influence at all.
Yeah.
And depending, of course, too, who wins that election at that point, who the nominees are and everything. But I have not missed going to the U.S. over the last few years, and it's been a few years for me, and I don't miss it now, and I doubt very much I'll miss it going forward. There are other places now that I've identified that if I do any traveling, I'm going elsewhere, and the U.S. is just totally off the ticket.
Good for you,
altogether. Gary. So, and yeah, we are doing our bit in trying to buy as much Canadian as possible, and looking for other alternatives like Mexico's. A lot of the supermarkets are buying Mexican produce now, so that's fine. That's working out well, and different things like that. So, yeah, it's there, and every little bit counts, people. Every little bit counts. And just to wrap it up, I asked everyone, should we walk? My personal opinion is, why is Dominique going back next week? Just Dominique's time right now could probably be better spent with a task force that's out knocking on doors elsewhere in the world and building relationships to start planting the seed for solid trading relationships elsewhere. And we're helping some of the smaller countries as well to put the wall up around the U.S. so that they don't have to climb over it and bow down and kiss the ring and to get things. So, it's a trade war. It's called a trade war. We are at war, and it's getting worse with Trump, and he's getting harder to deal with. He's really becoming irrational at times. I think the American people have a lot to worry about right now. I know sleeping, we're like the mouse sleeping next to the elephant, and as the mouse, I'm really worried about the elephant rolling over. So I think we should walk away And in the back of our minds, we'll say, okay, we'll take a couple of months, just let them stew or whatever. If a phone call comes from Trump to Carney, I don't know if I'd even take it. At that, at least in the first month.
Yeah, let them sweat for a bit. I'm with you.
Yep. So, and we really focus and put our energy, because the return on investment over the last number of months, even before Carney became leader and then won the election and became prime minister, and now the return on investment on what the time and effort that Carney has invested in these negotiations is not there. Mm-hmm. We're getting a better return on investment, turning our attention to the European Union and in Southeast Asia and Australia, you name it. So I think that's where we should be going. Let Trump stew. Give us all a break in Canada from listening to Trump's name every day related to tariffs on Canadian goods or whatever. Let them ramble. Yeah. And I think we have to get a little bit tougher than what we have been. And I would like to see some kind of tariff retaliation next week, announced next week. Let's start hitting them. As Doug Ford said, let's hit them and hit them hard. And with that, Eddie, I think probably it's time. It's a Friday night. It's, like I said, the beginning of a long weekend in most of Canada. So Trump's tariffs landed without warning or negotiation originally, and Canada didn't get its lifeline. The road ahead is tense. Economic fallout, political backlash, and looming trade decisions. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Night Talk tonight. We'll keep it grounded, informed, and ready for whatever comes next. We'll be there. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. From Montreal, I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Eddie.
Good night.